We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some trade talk around a handful of teams, including the Chicago Blackhawks, the Washington Capitals, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the Buffalo Sabres. We also have player safety issuing a fine to Carolina's Jackson Blake. Several injury updates here today as well. Also, it sounds like the Blackhawks may be closing in on an extension for their general manager. Plus, we had a trade earlier today involving some prospects. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have plenty to discuss here in today's video. We will start things off by discussing an update from the Department of NHL Player Safety. Carolina Hurricanes forward Jackson Blake has been fined the maximum allowed per the CBA for slashing, which is $2,358 for a slash onto the upper body of Anaheim Ducks defenseman Jacob Trouba. It didn't look to be all that forceful, I guess you would say, but he did get his stick up. It was like a two-hander like swing like this, but it's not like I don't think he came down with a lot of force, but at the end of the day, you can't do that. And it's not just a normal slash that you see, to the stick or, something that's more of a hockey play. This was not a play. This was near the benches, away from the play. So it's obviously not even something that you really like to see. Anything overhand, especially in the upper body, is, especially frowned upon. So it makes sense that there was a fine, even though I don't think he did it super hard. It doesn't matter the motion, and it was there. And I can understand why they went ahead with the fine to try to deter him from doing that, I guess, in the future, but obviously not really too serious of a situation overall. All kinds of injury updates here today. The Seattle Kraken today announced that Freddie Gaudreau has been placed on injured reserve. He did leave last night's game that they were playing in the nation's capital in Canada versus the Ottawa Senators. He did not return to the game. I believe it was from a block shot, if I remember correctly. I was watching that game, but don't remember exactly what happened to Freddie. I just remember him leaving and didn't return, and now he's going to be out for a minimum 10 days, whereas John Hayden has been recalled to take his spot on the roster. The New York Rangers today also recalled Connor Mackey, so he's back on the NHL roster. The Capitals, without Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's still going to miss at least one more game. He's not playing tonight. They've recalled Ethan Frank. There is a chance that Dubois could be back within the next 1 to 2 games. He's not expected to be out for too long, but in the interim, Frank gets the call-up. The Vancouver Canucks also did activate defenseman Pierre-Olivier Joseph, so he's back in the mix. The Buffalo Sabres announced that they have another player who's going to be missing significant time, and that's forward Justin Danforth. Significant time in this case is not as bad as the Josh Norris situation. He's expected to miss at least a month, but they kind of positioned it as like 4 weeks plus. So it could be, 4, 5, 6 weeks. It's hard to say, but at least a month anyways due to a lower body injury. Michael Kesselring has started skating, so I don't think a return is what I'd call imminent, but it's at least making progress, getting closer. And Samuelson is closer to returning. Seems like he should return to action this week. The Sabres have 4 games coming up next week, so he should be able to get into either the next one or the one after. It won't be long before he's back. It seems like a return is imminent in his case. Of course, we knew LA Kings captain Anze Kopitar was injured. We know it's his final season. You certainly don't want to see it get off the rails for him, but he was hurt after taking a shot off his foot. And now we've got a further update. They're calling it week to week. So I would suggest that he's probably looking at least 2 weeks, but you rarely ever see a player, given a status of week to week that returns in 1 week. That almost never happens. Usually if it's going to be a week or anything around it, they call it day to day. So I would say, we're probably looking at a couple of weeks, but I don't know that for certain. Week to week it's a really difficult, vague timeline. I've seen it be 2 weeks. I've seen it be 4 or 5. You don't know. And I think it's probably early enough that they don't really know either. If they knew it was going to be 4 or more, they'd probably say a month plus. But at this rate, he's definitely going to miss some time, which unfortunate for him. Like I said, with it being his final season, and obviously I know looking at his stats, there's a lot of milestones and different things he could hit this year. I know he's hoping to have a shot to get into the playoffs and try to win one last Stanley Cup. There's lots of things I'm sure he wants to try to do this year. And, being such a respected player who's had a great career, regardless if you're an LA fan or not. I think most people would agree that you got to cheer for people too, and not just teams. And he's one of those guys you want to see everything go well for and kind of have success. So clearly, having a long-term injury would not be good, but when it comes to certain things, they're just hard to pinpoint the return time. The Calgary Flames have activated forward Jonathan Huberdeau, so he's finally ready to get into action, which has caused them to send Matt Vagradine back to the American Hockey League. So he had a chance to play a few games to start the year, but now that Huberdeau is ready, he's going to go be sent down. And the Ottawa Senators today also announced that they've returned forward Ollie Lexell to the AHL. He had already gone through waivers before the end of training camp when the regular season was getting ready to start, and they trimmed down the roster. He had already cleared but stayed up on the roster and got in a few games. He wasn't in the lineup. He missed, I think, the first two. It was a healthy scratch, and he played a couple. Then they brought up Arthur Kaliev for the last game against the Kraken, which they won. And I think they just kind of thought Kaliev did a better job in a spot in the lineup where they can put somebody like that right now over Lexell. So he will go down to Belleville. He'll be a big part of things there. They brought in Ollie Lexell on a lucrative two-way contract to hopefully play a lot of big games for the Belleville team. He's been a very, very good AHLer to help solidify that team a bit, and also probably get a chance to get some fourth line minutes at the very least in the NHL. But he did have a really good training camp. But unfortunately, the couple of games that he did get into in NHL action just didn't accomplish a lot. Put up 0 points, was averaging about 10 minutes a game. Wasn't all that noticeable. And I think when Kaliev came in, just a little bit of a heavier body and was played just a little more physical. And obviously, we know Kaliev has a really good shot, might be more of a threat to score, especially while they are without Brady Tkachuk for an extended time. They need to have a good approach here to balancing things out. So just kind of a good adjustment for them in that case. We'll see where things go. As I mentioned earlier today, we had a trade, nothing too substantial, but we did have a prospect trade between the Sharks and the Wild. The San Jose Sharks traded Oscar Olsson, the former Colorado Avalanche first-round pick back in 2021. Of course, he's only played 4 NHL games. He's mostly played with the Colorado Eagles American Hockey League club in his pro time in North America. Oscar Olsson, originally from Sweden, of course, didn't play at all for San Jose this year. So I would imagine he'll go to Iowa to play with the Minnesota AHL affiliate. I know I've seen some reports that they were looking for some more scoring for that team. Kyle Masters goes from the Minnesota AHL team to the Sharks, so he'll likely be suiting up for the Barracuda. David Jiricek, also the Wild, was sent down to Iowa as well. Now, on the rumor front, we've got a variety of things to take a look at here today. We'll start with the Chicago Blackhawks, who are doing battle with the Vancouver Canucks tonight. Further updates from Dave Pagnotta on the future of young forward Lukas Reichel, who's been kind of involved in rumor talk here in the last number of weeks, really. I think probably fair to say since the early part of training camp. It's kind of been, based on how time has gone for him in Chicago so far, shouldn't really come as any surprise to anybody to hear that. I think that probably on the player side and on the team side, they're both kind of maybe just a little frustrated that things haven't worked out better. I think Reichel has been a little bit, not, I don't want to say unhappy, but, just it seems like would like a more consistent opportunity. And obviously, at this point, it's not a given he gets traded. He hasn't asked for a trade. It's one of those situations with some of these other young players we've seen as well, whether it be, Brennan Othman or Chinnikov, we're going to talk about. It's Chinnikov's different. He actually did ask for a trade, but some of these players haven't. It just kind of made it known that things aren't working out here. I'd love a fresh start. If you could, I want more of an opportunity. If I can't get it here, I'd appreciate it if you could find an opportunity for me to be able to move on. It's kind of one of those situations. The belief is that there's a good amount of interest around the league in Lukas Reichel. It's not that there isn't, but the Blackhawks are in a situation where they don't really have to do anything here. They don't have to force something just for the sake of making a move. Nobody's kind of met their asking price or made an interesting enough offer to pull the trigger. And it's just that simple. I would suspect they're probably going to want a younger player back in a similar situation. But at this rate, there's, even though a lot of teams have been kind of keeping an eye on him, have expressed interest. I know Edmonton was one. The Oilers have expressed interest in a lot of scoring forwards as they kind of rejuggle things in their lineup here. But yeah, we'll see what happens. According to Pagnotta, it says that there's a chance that he stays, and because the longer things drag out with getting an offer, if he kind of finds a more of a groove and gets on a roll and starts putting up some more points, and they can kind of justify playing him in some better spots, more ice time and all that, maybe things change. But considering where things are at and the deep prospect group they have, it just sounds like both sides are probably ready for giving him a fresh start. Just a matter of when a team ups the ante enough to make them want to pull the trigger. Now, speaking of the Blackhawks as well, there was an update from Elliotte Friedman today on his latest podcast episode talking about Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson. He says nothing is imminent at this point, but things are trending like Kyle Davidson will be receiving a contract extension from the Blackhawks, remaining on as GM for an extended period of time. I think it's fair to say that the team is certainly showing a lot of promise. They're building a lot of a lot of young, talented players there in Chicago. I think so far this year, I'm not sure what you guys think, but I know for me, I feel like they've taken a step. I don't know how many more wins they'll get this year, but I do think that they're going to be more entertaining. I think there's more talent there, and it's coming along. It's going to be a while, I think, yet before they are going to be considered like a threat for playoffs or something. But all in all, there would be really not make a lot of sense to me to make a GM change now. You've trusted them so far this far into the rebuild. I think so far things are trending positively enough to give them an extension. So hard to say how many years, probably 3 to 4 year extension would be my guess. But Elliotte didn't give it an update on term or anything, just that things are trending that Davidson is expected to be extended here probably sometime soon. Nothing imminent, but soon-ish. Now, another young player in a similar spot as well as Hendrix Lapierre in Washington. Another article today I seen it was on Rush Machine Never Breaks, who covers the Capitals. Plus, you've also got another report from Frank Seravalli, which actually that article was referencing anyway. Lapierre did have a good preseason, but again, after a few games, we're in the same kind of spot we've seen with Lapierre a lot over the last year or two. He'll have little stretches where he gets in the lineup. They, I think, had hoped he would become their number 3 center, and then just kind of, ends up in a spot where they're kind of left wanting more, not getting enough out of him, and he becomes a healthy scratch. So he's kind of saw, ice time and role change reduced, and then go from there to out of the lineup. So Frank Seravalli on his latest show was wondering if there's a possibility they could flip him for another centerman, ideally somebody who can play second or third line center, but maybe somebody who's a little more established in their careers and has a little bit of term that might be signed for at least a couple of years. That way, it kind of really solidifies that position on the team and just kind of creates more stability because it's something that they're looking for. We know that Ovechkin is obviously nearing the end of his career. They want to be as competitive as possible while he's there. On a side note, with Ovi, he was asked just recently, as the season was getting underway, if this is it, or would he play? And he said he hasn't really decided yet. And the belief is, according to NHL insiders, we've heard a number of them say it, that basically, and I don't think this will come as a surprise to anybody, that if Alexander Ovechkin decides he wants to keep playing and wants to play for another season, then the Washington Capitals will take him back with open arms, sign him to a contract, probably, I'm assuming pretty much whatever he wants, and see what happens and play again. But it is a possibility, and there's been a lot of speculation that this very well could be the final season for Ovechkin, and that he very well might head and play a year in Russia before he's all said and done. He's said it numerous times that before he's fully retired, that's something he's highly considered and would love to do. So we'll see if that actually happens, but clearly for now, they're focused on making this team as good as possible for this year, trying to see if they can duplicate last year's success, hopefully go deeper into playoffs. And if Lapierre is not going to be consistently in the lineup, then they may try to move him for a player that they feel can take that job. So we'll see what happens there. And Igor Yegorchennikov in Columbus. Chinnikov's still looking for a trade. There was apparently, according to Columbus media, they said where he got into the lineup after being a healthy scratch. His first game of the season, there was a lot of scouts there, including 3 from the Oilers. Now, we had already heard reports previously, a number of weeks back, that the Oilers were keeping an eye on Chinakhov and that he might be a guy they look to. Obviously, some of these players that are younger on cheaper contracts, whether it's a rookie deal or a cheap bridge deal or something they've signed, for teams like Edmonton that are trying to contend and keep their window open and extend things, like they need players that can outperform their contracts, ideally in a tight cap situation. So if you can get a young player on a rookie deal or cheap bridge that can outperform it and give you better value, then that's exactly the kind of players that they're looking for. So three scouts from Edmonton at that game, they were not alone. They were not anywhere close to being alone. There was a total of 20 scouts there, and I believe there was close to 20 teams that had at least one scout or one body in the building to take notes and to watch Chinakhov play. So hard to say how close we are to getting a move, but as I stated before the season started, considering that we have a big Olympic break in February, which is not far before the trade deadline, I don't think we're going to see teams wait around like usual. I would not be surprised if we see more trade activity earlier in the year, maybe in November and even early part of December. I think you're going to see some moves that we'd normally see later, closer to the deadline, so that teams can get ahead of it. Between teams maybe not wanting to make sure that they get their business taken care of earlier so that they're stronger earlier to make sure they don't miss the playoffs. Between that and just not having a lot of time after the Olympic break, I think maybe the trade market could be a little bit more spread out this year, but we'll see if I'm right on that front or not. Another team I want to touch on as well is the Buffalo Sabres. Dave Pagnotta's reports on Alex Tuch indicate that after a lot of contract extension talks before the season, leading into the beginning of it, especially through training camp, they were obviously nowhere close to a deal, that the talks have been put on pause, especially after the Sabres didn't have a great start to the season. Not only the fact that they lost, but how they lost. The 0-3 start. I know they did pick up a win against the Senators in a really odd 8-4 kind of game. It was a really weird game with lots of goals and just weird stuff happening. Ottawa can't kill a penalty to save their life right now, which is obviously was beneficial to the Sabres. But the Sabres have, like I said, 4 games coming up this week, and they have some tough tests, a lot of divisional matchups. This is a big week for the Sabres. Yes, they got a win, so they got the goose egg off the win side of their record, but it's one game. If they have a bad week, we could still see a lot of the things that we were talking about before. If they have a good week, will it quiet things down? Yes, absolutely. I'm sure it will. I don't expect the owner to pull the trigger on anything, massive if they start playing much better consistently and winning some hockey games. But at the end of the day, regardless of all that, because of the bad start, negotiations with Tuch were put on pause. I think both sides wanted to probably have a chance to kind of reconsider where things are at. I'm sure Tuch was thinking, geez, this is a bad start. Do I want to extend here? Even though it's, like I said, kind of like a hometown team for him being from the area. And then, the team's probably thinking maybe we shouldn't sign anybody long-term right now. We might be going through some changes if things don't turn around. Like I said before, too, you have to think that the ownership is thinking, if this doesn't turn around, we're going to have to make a GM move quickly because we can't let him make significant moves for this team. Now, there was also some reports as well. NHL executives kind of speaking off the record, if you will, talking about Kevin Adams a little bit and a little bit on the Dylan Cousins trade with the Senators for Josh Norris, that essentially GM Steve Stais of Ottawa was at him for quite an extended period of time to make a trade. Like, he was trying to get Cousins for a while, and he had been also actively trying to move Norris for a while, had conversations with a bunch of teams, and basically was just relentless on Adams. And eventually Adams caved and made the deal. So I think so far it's fair to say Ottawa is a lot happier with this trade. As much as they like Josh Norris as a person, he couldn't stay healthy. And, well, he's not played very many games for Buffalo so far, and he's a great person, great player, but the knock on him is his health. And so far, he had an injury right after getting to Buffalo last year, only played a few games, missed the rest of the year, and in the first game of the season gets a significant injury yet again. So far, that decision's coming back to bite him pretty hard. I mean, clearly, I think they're a little gun shy, which is what some of the other executives talking about the situation. They said that Adams is gun shy was the word they used, saying that he had just really indecisive and kind of wrestled with that move for quite a long time before Stales wore him down and got him to convince him to make the change or make the trade. So I don't know that we're going to see a huge deal out of Buffalo. I think the first breaking news might just be a GM change. But like I said, winning solves everything. If they get their act together and have a good stretch, then maybe that noise will calm down for a little while. But if they have a bad stretch here in the next week to 10 days, I would think that noise is going to get real loud. His seat's going to get real hot, and we very well will see a change. But we'll have to see. It's been one win, but it's just one. They need to string together, I think, a bunch of wins to really quiet things down. So we'll see what happens in Buffalo. That is all your news and rumors for today. Let me know your thoughts on everything discussed in the comments below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.